Would you like to share some books, maybe? I have more, actually. I should bring more for next time. Is your book on page 29? Yeah? Okay, perfect. So welcome to our Just One Word Emunah class. We are page 29 if you have that book and you want to follow with us. And we're going to say הפרק התהילים. שיר המעלות, אשרי כל יראי אדוני העולה מדרכיו, יגיע כפיך כתאכל ישריך וטוב לך, ואשתיך כגפן פוריה בירכתי ביתך, בניך כשתילי זיתים סביב לשולחנך. הנה כיכן יברך גבר יא אדוני, יברכך אדוני מציון וראה בטוב ירושלים כל ימי חייך, וראה בנים לבניך שלום על ישראל. Very tricky when you have like two different languages, one on top of the other. And may this class be dedicated for the Refuah Shelema Bezrat Hashem of Eleni Orna Bat Chen Chana, Raphael Chaim Meir Ben Sima Chasha, Caroline Yehudit Bat Joël Eliane Sima, Laurence Aviva Bat Sarah, Raphaël Yaish Ben Chana, Daniel Yosef Ishai Ben Daniel Miriam, Rachel Bat Maknin, and Noah Ben Sloan, Bezrat Hashem. Okay. So we were Labriut. Who would like to so we were speaking about Emunah, and we were at the first parts of the book, reminding us that Emunah is a skill. It's like a muscle, right? That we can develop and work out. Okay, so it's very interesting to know that, because we can think, oh, wow, those people have so much emunah. I was not gifted with that from birth. It's not true. We all have emunah, and we can all develop it. It's a skill. And this is great to know, because we can work on that, okay? So now we were about to read a lesson at the market. Anybody would like to start reading? Virginie, tu veux?
Yosef Meir of Mashnovka was a grandchild of Reb Itzikel Skever. One day, young Yosef Meir took a stroll in the marketplace. When he arrived home, Reb Itzikel greeted him and asked him where he had been. I went to the cattle fair, Yosef Meir replied with a grin. I heard a rumor that Eliyahu Hanavi is around there, and I thought I might meet him. No, did you meet him? His grandfather probed. No, I didn't. So what did you see there? The sharp-witted boy knew he must provide a sufficient clever answer to satisfy his illustrious grandfather. I'll tell you what I observed. He answered spontaneously. I saw many oxen tied up, waiting to be sold. There were some that resigned themselves to their fate, and they stood in line patiently until they were fed and given to drink. There were others that pulled and kicked wildly, angrily trying to break free of the rope. They were beaten and bruised unnecessarily. He took a deep breath and continued. Every person has his own pekel. Some accept that it is from the Ribono Shel Olam, and they are calm. Hashem accompanies them throughout their challenge, and they manage to cope. Others try to fight. They're not prepared to accept their lot, and they cause themselves superfluous pain and anguish. Reb Itzikel kissed Yosef Meir on his cheek, and he told him with obvious delight, if that's what you observed, then maybe you didn't see Eliyahu Hanavi, but he certainly saw you.
That's beautiful. The Or HaChaim writes that when a person accepts his Yisurim are the suffering, that it is his best remedy. Acceptance is the best remedy. When a person stops trying to get his way at all cost and blaming others for his failing, and he resigns himself to Hashem's will, he's zoche to Yeshuat. He's meritant to be delivered, to be freed. Okay? What does it inspire you? What does it echoes in your mind, in your hearts, in your experience?
Said that he went to look for Eliyahu, but he didn't see it. And what he described to his grandfather was that he described what he actually saw, but so maybe the grandfather said you didn't look in the right way or in the right places because he probably was there and you missed. Is that what he's saying?
I think what the purpose of that story is more to teach us that, yes, he did go over there because he wanted to see Eliyahu Navi, but what he saw is that there were oxes who were attached. They were tied very, very strongly, right? Some were calm because they accepted that anyways, they are tied. What are they going to fight? They're going to lose their time, their energy. And
That's right.
yes. So there were others who were actually like trying to escape from their, and they were beaten. Okay. So he relates that to us. He says, we all have adversity in our lives. Those of us who accept the adversity in our lives, Hashem accompanies us and he helps us to cope with this adverse situation. Those who fight, who complain, who try to everything to get out of their situation, of their suffering, without recognizing that it comes from Hashem, will actually not make space for Hashem, so Hashem will not be there for them. Right? So and that's why Reb Yitzkel says to his son, if that's what you observed, even if you didn't see Eliyahu Hanavi, he probably saw you, because this was such a beautiful way to understand what happened on the marketplace. So it's not really so much about Eliyahu Hanavi, but it's more about accepting the situation. There is in Pirkei Avot chapter 4, I don't remember if we learned it together when we learned Pirkei Avot, Ezeu Ashir Asamer Bechelko, who is rich, the one who accepts, who is happy with what he has, right? Somehow the way we perceive the situation we are in, we can turn it into a terrible nisayon, or we can also say, you know what, Baruch Hashem, I accept this situation. I'm going to give you an example. I have a friend whose son suddenly got a very scary health challenge. He woke up one day and he couldn't see clearly. He was seeing double. And his eye was totally off. Like he couldn't control one of his eyes. She's a nurse, so she knew that there was something a little complicated, and she took him to the ER. Over there, they realized that there was something wrong in the brain. They ran some tests, and they discovered that he had some lasers, white lasers, in several parts of the brain and in the spine, right, around the spine, in different places. And basically, like, it was a very complicated situation. It hinted to a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And her father actually has that disease. So they said like it could be also genetical. He stayed over there. He was not well at all. He was treated for several days. And I visited her Motzei Shabbat. And she told me, can you believe how lucky I am? Baruch Hashem. That it's not something worse. This girl has an Emunah and a Bitachon that is not from this world. She told me, like, can you believe like how lucky we are? That is just that. people have such worse situations. Thank God, the situation has evolved, and it seems that their diagnosis was wrong. Baruch Hashem. So, but it exactly. We have to understand how, like, another person could have drowned, could have been totally overwhelmed by the situation and have looked at it like, why is Hashem doing that to me? I am such a good person. I keep Shabbat. I have a beautiful family. I am a mora in a school. I give so much to everyone. Why is he doing that to me? Why? Right? It would be normal to even think that. Have you abandoned me? Why are you giving us this challenge? No. Wow, Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, that you only gave us that. And that there's a solution. There's a treatment. Wow. So the way people perceive their reality also has a huge impact on how they feel, for sure. That makes sense. But even on how the reality is going to change or not. And will Hashem, because we know that a nisayon, a challenge, right, is only here it's a test. So it's here to test us. Did we learn a lesson? Yes or no? What is the lesson I have to be tested on with this nisayon? If it is for me to recognize that, listen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I trust you, of course, right? Then when I show that I understood the lesson, is there a need for the test to continue? No, the test is over.
I had a very similar experience, actually.
Share it with us if you're okay with that.
When I was born, all the doctors were like, she's perfect, she's great. I had a C-section, and the whole pregnancy, I was fighting with my doctor. Not fighting, but I was telling him the whole pregnancy, I'm so scared of surgery. So the whole pregnancy, I was like, I don't want C-section, I don't want C-section. Please make sure I don't have a C-section. Please give me a natural birth. I was like, I don't want to be cut. I don't want surgery. Please make sure I have it. Everything happens. I end up having a C-section. Thank God, because I had the C-section, I spent one more night at the hospital. And because I spent that one more night at the hospital, the year I was born with something in her heart.
Wow.
And they didn't know. They could have caught it before, but they didn't. And if I didn't have a C-section, we would have left one day early. And the nurse, actually, the day we were checking out, the nurse comes to check her and do the final check to leave. That's after 3 days that all the doctors said she's perfect, she's great, everything is great. She's like, she's breathing heavily. Let me just take her to the thing. We're gonna check her. First time parents were like overwhelmed with everything. I didn't sleep for a whole week. Had a very tough situation the whole last week of the
pregnancy,
of the delivery, whatever. I said, okay. We look at each other like, okay, maybe it's just something, not a big deal. She takes me there, hours pass, like we're supposed to check out. My mom is waiting downstairs with the car. We're waiting. Then we say, let's go see what's going on. So we go to the thing. Huge amount of people surround her. We're like, what's going on? And they're like, we don't have time to explain. We have to rush her to the NICU. We have to intubate her and we'll tell you later. I say it now because it's been so many years and it's easier to say, but then they go and they do that. Then they sit us in a big conference room like this with like 15 doctors. And the head of the doctor, like the specialist, whatever, is explaining all these things, which thank God, because I had the medical background, I understood what he was talking about and the different parts and whatever, but I had never heard of that specific thing that she had, but I had heard of but he was giving us a diagnosis that was like the worst thing ever. And he was saying basically she has to have open heart surgery like tomorrow, and it's 50-50 chance, and like he was saying us like literally the worst prognosis and the worst thing that could be. And I look at him and me and Mark were getting all this, and we're like shocked. Wow. And then I see Mark texting, and I'm like, how can you be texting right now? And like, I'm mad at him. I'm like, we're getting the worst news of our life and you're texting? He's like, no, because apparently he had a friend whose kid had gone through the same thing, or very similar to. So he was
She
getting
wanted
all
to
the
know.
information and like who to go see and to get opinions and whatever. So then they tell us we have to transfer her to another hospital that specialized in the cardiology for babies.
That was in New York?
That was in New York. So we go to Columbia, they have a specialty labor, but there's no space. Because it's like very, very limited amount of spots they have, and it's, I guess, a lot of kids need it. So we wait, we call everyone we know, is there someone that's leaving that we can take? It was very urgent. She was intubated, but she couldn't be intubated for too long because it's not healthy. So we're like, okay. So then Mark, they're like, the best thing you can do to me is rest, because I hadn't slept in like 4 days or 5 days. Rest and pump so you can breastfeed her, because that's the best thing she can have. So I said, okay. So they give us the worst news. And very bad prognosis. And Mark decides to like stay with her at night. So I stay there till like 11:30 at night. And then I go home and he goes in the ambulance with her to take her to the next place. Then they're like in the ambulance, he hears them talking and whatever, and he's like, he calls me, he said, this really doesn't sound good. They're talking all these crazy things, and I don't know, it doesn't sound good. Tell him, don't worry. I think the guy overdid it. I tell him, I don't think it's as bad as he says. And I'm like, don't worry, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna figure it out. She's gonna be fine. They're like, really? I think he's like, I don't think it's as bad as he says. So then I make a promise. Make a promise to Hashem.
Right.
That night I'm like, okay, I'm becoming kosher.
Wow.
I was kosher inside the house, but I wasn't kosher outside. That night I'm having fun. I'm like, okay, I'm becoming kosher from now on. And the next day, so they take her in at the new hospital. The next day I go, and there's a whole new round of they test her. But thank God, they're like, the prognosis went from like horrible to like much more manageable. And then like, yeah, we still have to do the surgery, but it's much less invasive, much higher success rate. She'll be okay. We can wait till she's older. The goal was to do like the least amount while she's like 3 days old, and then wait to see, And then thank God they're like, we can do surgery from the back. We just have to cut one area of her artery. The rest we're gonna monitor, and we'll do things as she grows older, And thank God that's what happened.
Wow.
So it went from like the worst thing you could ever hear as a parent to something that's still like
Manageable.
super stressful. It's super hard, but like you went from thinking like we don't know what's gonna happen to thinking like hopefully like we're in the hand of a good doctor and they'll do this. And you know what the doctor's name was? No, he was Asian at Columbia, and his name was Dr. Chai.
Hi.
Chai, spelled like Chai.
Wow.
We're like, wow.
You
was
felt
crazy.
that night you needed to do that, you just like felt it.
Yeah, that day I was like,
You know, that's the exact living example of what living Emunah is. Understanding that, you know what, in this situation, there's only one person who can change. Kadosh Baruch Hu. What can I do to show you that I'm creating this kli for you to give me? I need you side by side with me. And the fact that you decided to eat kosher outside of the house, it's a huge thing. It's very, very tough. Kol hakavod for being able in that moment of suffering to bring him in. You literally like drag him in.
I really believe when you really want something, you give something back.
Exactly. That was our previous class, actually. The ratzon, the will. You really want it, then you make the space for Hashem to come and enter.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing.
But it was crazy because we heard all these things and then it cannot be like, don't worry, everything will be okay. The guy was like over exaggerating, like maybe he doesn't know what he's talking to me, he doesn't understand things. Like I was trying to calm him because he was so stressed. Like, it's gonna be okay. God is with us, he's gonna help her, he's gonna,
Correct.
And the next day they're like, they give so much hope, It was crazy.
That's a crazy situation.
And then the whole thing was discovered surgery on surgery on a 4-day-old baby. It's still super.
Of course. Yes.
First one.
I'm so sorry that I have to interrupt the class, but I have a meeting for university for my son.